everyone formally now as well. It's my great pleasure to announce Professor Victor Castellani tonight, and I wasn't too surprised that he started talking to you, and had he continued straight into the lecture, that would have been perfectly at home, because he's more at home here than most of you here, because half of you here are first-year students, and Victor has been coming to see us for 15 years, if not more, maybe even...
First one was in 2010, so this is now 15 years.
So we have had many wonderful lectures. We have had a bunch of trial simulations that our students have conducted under his guidance and by his ideas, always with historical or sometimes mythological figures. When you were Heracles, that was beautiful, and we have recordings of that on YouTube, so you can have a look if you wish. This year, unfortunately, because the beginning of our school year was postponed and everything, we could not plan for a simulation, but maybe next year, who knows? You've been saying for 5 years back, I think, that this is your last time coming here, so I hope that this one isn't the last either. But if it turns out to be...
but it depends on my wife's health.
I understand completely. And we are very, very happy to have you here, and we will be happy to have you here for as long as you're able and willing, of course. And I think you will all have a very interesting lecture, and I would ask the people online to mute their microphones, please, particularly if they intend to be sneezing. So, without further ado, I'll give the floor to you. And of course, once again, dear students, as the professor told you, if you have any questions, if something is unclear, don't hesitate. I'm sure he'll explain everything in a very lovely way, and sometimes with a bit of humor.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Oh yes, I'm very vain about my sense of humor. So if you think I am trying to be funny, smile. Laugh if you can, but don't groan, and try not to fall asleep. I'll try to keep you alert, but it's better if you understand what I'm saying. That's why I repeat my plea that you, if any of you is confused, please stop me, because it's not likely to be only one of you. All right, let's get going. Politics and politics. Political is used sometimes in a neutral way, and it means having to do with whatever the political organization is, whatever the state or some other organization. Of course, you have politics in associations besides nation states or subdivisions of those states. But to be political is simply to pay attention to the needs, to the aims, and trying to serve the needs and aims of whatever the group is, a nation state or even a committee that will have politics within it. But then there's politics, and we use in American English, we very often, the word has in fact been hijacked, and we say, well, it's political. And you heard even the force of contempt in that expression. It's political, it's just political. It's somebody who is grinding his own axe, who is attacking someone else. Usually it's attacking someone else in order to advance his own agenda. What I'll be talking about now, and for a while, is that there are, in both of the ancient societies, the Greek one, Athens, at its high point in the 400s BCE, or the 5th century BC, and Rome in the last century of BCE. Those historical places went through important transformations, revolutions, and sometimes successive revolutions. That was especially true in Rome during the last century BC. And when there were those revolutions, there were people who were doing politics of the attack kind, where they were, in order to win in what we call a zero-sum game, in order to get their position high, they have to reduce the opposition. Here are things before the revolutionary period, and then somebody does this, but these people are not very happy being down here. They'll go that way. All right. We're not going to have a whole course in Roman or Greek history here. I encourage those of you who have some interest in ancient history to pursue some of the tips that I will give you, including a couple of publications that have guided me. Both of those publications, the publication of one of my profs at the university, at Princeton University, who's still alive now, he's a grand old man, Bob Connor. He led a seminar on Thucydides, the great Athenian historian, that I attended and to which I contributed. And I haven't been in touch with him for a while, but it's great to know that he's still around, and it is a resource as an emeritus prof at Princeton. That was published 1971, the year of my dissertation. Also published, or republished, I should say, was the Lily Ross Taylor, very rare for a woman at that point. 1949 is when she gave some distinguished lectures at the University of California. 1949, the number of female full prof historians of Rome were probably, I don't think I need all of the fingers of this hand. It's a remarkable piece of work, and I have reread it, just as I have reread the Connor work in preparation for this, because I generally don't live in ancient Rome. It's a long time since I've been immersed in it, and I don't spend a whole lot of time dealing directly with history, although, as you see in the tiny print, I say there are three great events, these publications, and then my unpublished dissertation. I spend my time with tragedy and comedy and epic. So to a certain extent, I'm trespassing here. But in order to understand Golden Age Latin literature and high classical Greek literature and back to archaic in the centuries before the 400s, the 500s, 600s, and so on, back BC, in order to understand the literature, one must have the entire cultural context. That includes religion, and I've done a lot on ancient polytheology, the philosophy, but also the law and the politics. All right, Athens and Rome, and let me see, how am I going to scroll up? I think I'll be able to. Does this screen work? No, it doesn't work that way.
You have to use either the arrows or the touchpad. So you can use this.
And about as low tech as you can be.
Or you can just use the arrows.
Oh, okay, the arrow did work. Okay, maybe I just didn't press it hard enough. Okay. One of the stable courses that I taught for all the time I was at DU, and I was there teaching for 53 years, was a mythology course. And the Greeks themselves developed their myths in order to express not necessarily what they would understand as exact history of events that actually took place with the people named in them doing whatever the myth says. But they did use myths sometimes to characterize themselves. And at the very top, we have a myth from Athens and it's about their great hero, Theseus, the guy who killed the Minotaur, and the guy who did some other important things. Well, the part that is important, the part of his long story that's important to me, is that he unified all of Attica. In the older mythology, the older generations of mythology, Theseus lived several generations after the beginnings of Athens. Over that period, there was war between Athens and some of the other cities, one in particular, in Attica. That's that projection of the Greek mainland that includes Athens on it. Theseus was was believed or supposed, for the purpose of telling the story, to have unified Attica. So everyone who lived in Attica, other cities, towns, villages, out on the farms, everyone belonged to Athens. So Attica and Athens, or Athenian, coincided. So that's one myth of unification. The Romans, at their foundation, and there were no historical records of the foundation, but at their foundation had, in fact, a menu of Greek myth patterns to adopt and to adapt, to take over, but then to change, fitting their own circumstances. And they had one myth that, according to which a nymph, a goddess named Rome, was somehow the founder. Somebody presumably got her pregnant, and then the Romans descended from her. And there were other forms of the story. There were forms of the story in which there was a Romulus, no Remus, or there was a Remus, no Romulus. Each of those names would be suitable. The O, the E, those are variable in certain kinds of linguistic circumstances. Either of those was available for a founder. So there's a guy named Romulus founded Rome. Simple. No, there's a guy named Remus founded Rome. Simple. To put the two of them together and then have one of them kill the other or order the death of the other, or to suggest to one of his followers that this guy has got to be eliminated. That is, and especially if you have the model of the Greek myth that lies behind this, it was myth that came from ancient Thebes, mythological prehistoric Thebes, that the Romans adopted a myth in which there were two cooperating brothers. One of them was an athlete and the other one was a musician, but the two of them cooperated in the refounding of the city of Thebes. The Romans took that pattern, and I can't elaborate now on all of the detail in the pattern. It involves other members of the family besides those two brothers. But what the Romans did is they took that, two cooperative brothers, and then they had one kill or at least be responsible for the death of the other. Why would they adopt that myth? There is, in fact, a historical realism. From its earliest history, there was a lot of violence in Rome. There was a violent overthrow of a line of kings. And there were examples of strife, secession, division of different levels of the society against one another. And there, in fact, had not been out-and-out civil war at the time when the Romans were first entertaining this Romulus versus Remus myth. But there were certainly civil wars. There was civil strife, short of war, late in the 100s BCE. And there was civil war early in that last century. There were actually 3 civil wars fought during that 100 years of violence at Rome. But all right, let's start with Athens. And what I want to do first is to talk a little bit about constitution, government, and law, and then become concrete about it in discussing 2 of the most important figures, familiar figures of respectively Greek history, Pericles, the leader of the Athenian democracy at its height, and Caesar, the first Caesar, who established himself as a monarch, and on the Ides of March, 44 BC, became, he died, but then he was supposed to have become a star or something afterwards. We're not going to worry about that mythology. Whoops. I have to go down. All right. Now, the names here are not terribly important for the time being. Solon is a great lawgiver who did the best he could to reduce strife among the classes at Athens. Pisistratus was a tyrant. At least he was a tyrant in the estimation of people who did not like strong one-man government, and they hated the peace that he brought. He made Athens prosperous. While other cities were fighting one another, and their prosperity was damaged. Pisistratus is an admirable person, but the Athenians regarded him and his sons as bad, as tyrannical, not just technically tyrants, which has a special application in ancient Greek, but as tyrannical, brutal, violent. Pisistratus, in fact, didn't rule that way. And then Ephialtes. We'll come back to Ephialtes in a bit. On the Roman side, you have Marius and Cinna. That's the way we usually pronounce it in English. It would be Cinna, pronouncing the Latin more the way the Romans did. And they led what we would call, I guess, a left-wing revolution in the 80s of that last century BCE. There was a man named Sulla. It looks like a feminine inflection, but it's in fact a man's name, who led a counter-revolution and established a very conservative, a narrow, essentially oligarchic government of the people. And have to talk about oligarchy and nobility and the control of the Roman populace. And populace means everybody, the whole nation. By a big club of nobles, the senatorial nobility. And this brings me to the next line, the demos, notice the bold type, the demos ton Athenaion, which is the demos, and I'm leaving it untranslated, the demos of the Athenians. Sometimes their government or their nation is just called the Athenians. We call it Athens in our usual discussion of the history, but they didn't call it that. They didn't call it by the name of the city. They called it by the name of the people who lived there. They believed, in fact, that the name of the city and the name of the great goddess Athena, with a magnificent temple on the Acropolis that Pericles built out of what we'll be talking about a little bit later. They believe that they were named after Athena. In fact, Athena was named after them. She's the goddess of Athens, a particular goddess worshipped probably back into the Bronze Age at Athens, who could be known as the Lady of Athens, she of Athens. But in any case, the Athenians were connected with her, and the Athenians were a demos. Not before the last century BC, or I'm sorry, not before the second century BCE. Way before that, when the democracy was established by the man Cleisthenes, whose name you see on the screen. The name for the government in the 400s. Was the demos of the Athenians. Sometimes it was called, when they had a stone inscribed with the resolution of the government, it was the boule and the demos. I still haven't translated demos, but the boule is a probalutic. Haven't seen that word very often, I don't think. It was a pre-deliberating council chosen by lot out of citizens of all but the lowest of the census classes. 500 people chosen by lot. And they were in constant session for 1 year. Lots and lots of one-year appointments, some at Rome and some at Athens, although the most important ones at Athens were ones that could be, that could re-elect the holders of those offices. We'll get to that in a moment. But the Boule was not a senate. It was not a standing organ of state. The demos, and now I've got to translate demos. You know, it's the word that you get in democracy. It can mean nation, everybody who belongs to a nationality, speak the same language, have the same culture, maybe with some local variations, but essentially are a homogeneous group, just in terms of social, cultural identity. But the demos in this application means the political nation. But it refers to everyone. Now, when people who didn't think everybody ought to have a share in government talked about demos, they talked down about it. It's the common people. And sometimes the common people who wanted to assert themselves, or leaders who wanted to use the common people, the majority against the noble minority, they would raise the demos. They say the demos is the real people, is the real nation, even if the high aristocrats regarded themselves as something above. Come back to the citizenship matter in a few minutes. Now, over on the Roman side, notice how I have bold for senatus. The Senate, use the English word for it, the Senate at Rome was a standing body. It consisted of people who held or had held magistracies in the one-year appointments that Romans with political ambitions would ascend from step to step all the way up to the highest executive office, the consulship. Well, the Senate was people who had held those offices, and the Senate was the one continuing organ of the Roman government. So the Senate and the populace is the name of the Roman government. It still is the name of the local government at Rome. Yes, you see SPQR. If you ever go to Rome, you'll see it on manhole covers and on different things, on garbage cans. So the Senate, this body of people who had been elected, not chosen by lot, had been elected to high office at Rome. They sat on this, and they essentially guided the state. Now, how were the people involved? The people were involved in electoral and in legislative bodies, but those bodies tended to be controlled by the members of the Senate or the members of the senatorial class. So Rome, although it looks, by having populus in the name, it looks like it is maybe a mixed government with an aristocratic or an oligarchic portion, and then a national, a broad, popular portion, having maybe equal power. That would be misleading until some of the revolutionary actions of the time within 2 or 3 generations before the great crises of the 1st century BCE. Now, constitutional IDE. The Greeks had a kind of social political organization from which we get the word political, polis. It's translated as city-state, but it's a lot more than simply a secular state. It involves a religious community, a social identity, cultural identity, and a history and a mythology. I've already suggested that. I don't want to go further with that because we don't have infinite time. Politeia is the name of a constitution. Now, all of you probably have heard of the Republic of Plato. That in English, I'm not sure how it's named in Serbo-Croatian, but the Republic of Plato translates the Greek title Politeia, and Politeia means a national body looked at politically. The word can actually be used for constitution. Because the Constitution is identical with the government and the style of government of a country.
Just to answer in Serbian, we just call it država, state.
What's that?
In Serbian, we translate it as država, state.
Okay, state. Looking on the Roman side, it is called res publica. Res is several different things rolled into one. It's the property, it's everything of value that belongs to the people, which the people supposedly manage, but it's really the Senate managing it. So it's the property. Res can be property. It's the property of the nation, but the masses of the nation are subject really to the control of the senatorial nobility until some reforms occur in the 1st century BC, beginning some of them before that, but some of them rather incremental. It is opposed in a certain level of abstraction to res unius. Unius is of a one person. That would be a monarchy. And monarchia in Greek has essentially the same value as res unius. And then there would be res paucorum, a thing of few. And you call it the left wing, the progressives, who want to involve everybody in government by their votes, by their collective will. Those people said that the senatorial government of Rome was essentially res paucorum, the affair, the property of few people, the few rather than the many. In Greek political thinking, there is always hoi oligoi. We get oligarchy from that, the few, as opposed to the many, hoi polloi. And I don't know whether you're familiar with that expression, but hoi polloi, even as it's used now in American English, is disdainful. The many people, the ordinary people, the people who look at the entertainments that are, in fact, too low, too vulgar for us to pay attention to. The masses, the people who fall for all of that advertising and buy stuff that they don't need, eat stuff that's poisoning them, drive cars that are overpriced and don't work very well. Those people, keep them down. They really are not smart enough. They work too hard even to think, let alone to govern themselves. So we'll govern them, and we will treat them. If we are good senatorial nobles, we will treat them the way we would treat our cattle. We want our cattle to be healthy. We want to fleece them if they're sheep. We want to milk them if they're cows. We may want to eat them at a certain point, but we'll leave that out of it. But if the people are able somehow, without guidance, to vote for people in office, and to vote for laws, because every law at Rome was, in fact, a referendum. It had to be referred to the people, but the way the people were herded into pens, so that a large number of people would have one vote. And in the next pen, a large number of people would have another vote. And then you have a few of the nobles, and they have a vote equivalent to the others. That's the way the important assemblies worked. Well, If you are left-wing progressive, you don't like that, especially if you think the people are not so stupid. The people are certainly smart enough to know what their own interest is, and their interest does not coincide with that of the nobles who are managing an empire so that they can get rich, not for the good of the people, although they will make some condescension. They certainly don't want the people to starve because some people got to do all the work. Now, state and citizenship. There is an interesting fact about the name of citizen between the two classical languages. In Greek, there's a distinction between a male and a female person of citizen class. In Latin, they have one and the same word for a male or female member of the citizen class. And they name, in fact, one of the names for their state is Civitas. That would be a collection of male and female persons of the citizen class, even though the females, the Roman women didn't have vote, although they had a higher position in family life and social life, and sometimes even in political life as advisors, as companions to some of the leading men who depended upon their women. There are some wonderful Roman legends about the power of women that I don't have time to talk about now. It's actually part of a lecture that you're not going to get. Government officers, these are important. There were, at the end of the tyranny of Pisistratus' sons, or Pisistratus' sons, I'm never very happy pronouncing it either way, Pisistratus. After the tyranny, there was a man named Cleisthenes, who was an aristocrat himself, but realized that Pisistratus was actually quite popular. And so if we're going to have a new government that's not a tyranny, the people should have a share, not a very big share, but a share in the selection of their rulers and in the laws that are going to apply to all of them. And the name for the new democracy that was established by Cleisthenes late in the 500s BCE is called isonomia. And iso is which is a good name. I'm trying to think of an English word. An isosceles triangle has two sides exactly the same. It means equality, and nomos, equality under the law. The law should apply to everybody. Nobody is above the law. And that is their name. They didn't call it democratia. They called it isonomia. And to some extent, that began to be true. Although the senatorial nobility continued to have most of the real power. There were 9 magistrates who were chosen by lot from all of the qualified. The poorest people were not expected to be able to get away from their work. They had to work for their living. But people who are other than the poorest could be chosen by lot to be magistrates. One of them would give his name to a year. And he was chosen just by lot. Nobody elected him, but they're going to name that year after this guy. And then others were responsible for this or that task in the management of the polis. These persons, however, were responsible. They were chosen by lot. They weren't chosen for qualification. Nobody elected them. At the end of the year, they were relieved of this duty because there really wasn't much in it for them. They didn't even do a whole lot that would make it possible for them to put their hands out and get a little bribery. So these people were chosen by lot. But then, for each of 10 tribes, and Cleisthenes invented 10 tribes, each supposedly descended from some heroic mythological character. Each of the tribes would elect strategos. The word is translated as general, and originally, apparently, this was intended to be a kind of collective body who would control the actual military operations of the state. But nominally, one of those chosen by lot, archons, was actually called the archon of law. So he, in some ceremonial purposes, was the commander-in-chief, or at least the head of the military. But generals, some of them with very good experience, some of them with experience that they learned from a father who had been a general, whose father had been a general. So sometimes passed down in the family was military skill. And a couple of people that I'll talk about very briefly in the next couple of minutes were sons of distinguished generals and themselves became distinguished generals. Pericles was one of them. He was son of a famous general just around the turn of the 500s into the 400s, named Xanthippus. His chief rival, an interesting fellow by the name of, well, we say Cimon, although it's a C at the beginning. It just, Simon doesn't sound right to pronounce his name that way. This guy was the son of another famous general of the same time. The two fathers at their time were rivals. The two sons became rivals. Pericles chose to go in what you could call, I suppose, a left wing or a popularis direction. And this is something that happened at Rome as well. There were some of the bluest blood patricians descended, they said, from some of Romulus's companions, all the way back, hundreds of years ago. That's the highest patent of nobility, is to be descended from them. There are some of those who belong to the traditional nobility who went over to the other side. Their fellow nobles would say they went over to the dark side of hoi polloi, all those people who can't think because they're too busy working for us. These generals competed sometimes for military functions when there's going to be a war. Who's going to lead the infantry? Who's going to lead the ships, especially once they developed an important navy? We don't have time to get into how that happened. Legislative bodies. This is very, very complicated, and I'm not going to get into the complication. I've already suggested, though, the important point about this is that everybody had a fractional vote. But it might be the fractional vote of people in a group of a couple hundred people. And each of them will decide by a majority of them one vote. Whereas there might be a few of the blue bloods who have an equal vote. And so there might be, say, there are 6 of them. Each of them has 1/6 of that vote. We don't think they were quite as few as 6, but they were certainly more numerous than the hundreds that were sometimes all getting a tiny piece of one vote. Worse, the people who belong to these smaller groups with a bigger share of votes, they got to vote first. And there are others that got to vote in smaller groups, not necessarily the tiniest, but in smaller groups, who by the time it got to those people in their hundreds, probably not in thousands, but in hundreds, by the time it got to them to vote, there was already a majority that have adopted whatever the new law referred to the people. So the people, you could say the populace decided, but the populace in small groups over here of the blue bloods who vote first, and then these hoi polloi who are over in the middle. There are so many of them, they had to do this. They couldn't do this in the city. There's no place in the city. The forum wasn't big enough for this. They had to go out onto the campus marshes, which is where also the military drills took place. Now, electoral bodies, tribal voting was similar to this. Exception is the tribunate and tribal council. I can't get into too much detail there because I do want to get to our examples of Pericles and Caesar. But the electoral assemblies were not much better than the ones I just described for the legislature. A few guys have each a substantial share of a vote, and hundreds of people have less than 1% of a chance of getting whatever it is that they have been persuaded. Maybe they've been bribed. There were people who would hand out money. There were laws against, and those laws were typically ignored because, well, we're going to get to my expression of that on the next page, as you'll see in a bit, if I will shut up and move us along. But there is, and I notice this in bold print, there is something called ostracism. Ostracism is something that was established early in the democracy to prevent civil strife. If it was clear to the people that there is one person in particular who is getting too much influence, too much power, maybe he's got too much money and he can bribe too many people, they had the chance to exile this guy, so he's a guy, of course, to exile this guy for 10 years. He could keep his property. This is not an exile. It's just go away, cool off for a while, lose your influence so that by the time you get back, a lot of people won't even remember who you were and are not going to be grateful to you for passing out a few pieces of silver. Ostracism was an important technique, and Pericles used it brilliantly on two occasions to get rid of rivals of his. One, a rival with whom he could actually make arrangements. That's this guy, Cimon, who is the son of a general of the previous generation who competed with Pericles' father in that generation. Well, he got rid of this guy because this guy was too popular. He was apparently one of the nicest guys that we know of in classical Athens. He scandalized people by giving his wife a kiss when he went out the front door to go off and do his political stuff. Let's get to the next page. Here we are. Personal ties. There are all kinds of ways that people were bound by philia. Philia is essentially an untranslatable word. It can be translated love. It can be translated friendship. It can be translated obligation or belonging. Belongingness, that's a little ugly in English. People who are associated in some way closely or not so closely by blood ties in the male line, which is, of course, the most important in patriarchal societies, or by marriage, or by adoption in some cases, although that was it was not nearly so important as it was in Rome. In Rome, there was a system of clientela, or patronatus, where there are some people, relatively rich people, powerful people, and other people who depend upon them. And those who depend upon a very rich man could be very numerous. He would invite them to vote, to promise to vote for him or for whomever he chooses, if it's an election, or to vote for this law or against this law proposed, if he wants it or if he wants to prevent it. So there are a fair number of people at Rome, but there are people connected in different ways, and that's what Connor's book about the new politicians of the 5th century is about, the ways that people are connected. Now, was there a written constitution? No. Was there a written code of law? Well, there were individual laws, but there's no whole law code. And every time one of the legislative assemblies met, this is true at Athens, the assembly of all citizens was sovereign. In the afternoon, they could change what they did in the morning. Tomorrow, they could change what they did today. Absolutely sovereign. There's no Supreme Court. Nobody is telling them what the Constitution is. The Constitution is whatever they think it is. They will make it by their votes that day, what the Constitution is for that day. So, written Constitution? No. Code of law? Well, the Romans had something like a code of law, but it goes back to the 400s BCE and was in many ways obsolete. It was a compromise between nothing and something. And in some ways, it's probably closer for its actual practical value to nothing because of its ambiguities and its terseness, even its quaint language, which was opaque even to jurists centuries later. Now, moving further, we got politically weaponized justice system, courts. Both the Romans and the Greeks were very litigious. They were willing to sue one another and to countersue. If you sue me, I'm going to sue you. And the charges, by the way, did not have to have any evidence, just allegation. Anybody who wanted could launch a lawsuit, and he could say that this person did this. And not only did he not do it, he was in a different island, some other place when it's supposed to have happened. There was a weaponizing of the judicial system that is now, unfortunately, occurring in my country, and less said about that, the better. The hegemonic armed force is something that I need to talk about as quickly as I can. The Athenian Empire was built on thalassocracy, naval supremacy. And this required the participation of hundreds of thousands of Athenian citizens, mostly of the lower classes, who were paid for service in the fleet. The original Roman thought about infantry service before they had a navy, they didn't get a navy until sometime in the 200s BCE, was that you serve out of patriotic interest, but you don't expect to be paid. Pay for service came relatively late to the Romans, and that was for legionary service when they couldn't get enough citizens who could afford their own armor, that they would provide armor and they would pay some pay for the people. When there were legionaries at home in Rome, they were reasonably powerful a force, but they were typically a force out of loyalty to a general who had led them in victory. You know, if your general's a loser, you don't owe any loyalty to him. But he led you to victory, he led you to loot, and he might have even figured out some way to pay you or to get the Senate and the assemblies to authorize some modest payment. In Athens, the payment of the fleet was a huge budgetary issue. And it depended upon the operation of what I call the infernal machine. That is the Athenian Empire, which reduced Greek city-states, many of them under Persian rule, liberated from Persian rule by the Athenians, made into allies, Symachoi, fighting battle alongside the Athenians, made into allies. But then the Athenians said, well, we don't need all of you to fight alongside us. Just pay us. Pay us, and we will pay our citizens to row in the fleets. So the Athenians paid not just for the navy, and it's an infernal machine, I'll get this in a moment, but to pay for the beautiful buildings after the Persian Wars. The Acropolis of Athens was in ruins. The Persians knocked down everything that was standing and burned everything that would burn. Well, Pericles used revenue from this alliance, so-called, but it actually became a set of subject allies. Subjects, in fact, you don't need the allies there. They're unequal. It's not an alliance at all. Well, the revenue was therefore used by the Athenian fleet, not just to fight foreign enemies, but to keep those allies paying their silver tribute, their contribution for them. All right, let's move on. I see what time it is. Empire, okay. You have a bit of this here. Checks and balances, nope. I mentioned that the Athenian assembly is absolutely sovereign. Everything it decides is beyond any kind of control unless the assembly is persuaded that they ought to reconsider this. Sometimes it would even happen in the afternoon of the day. Other times there's an important case when thousands of lives were saved. when they decided the next day and decided that instead of killing thousands of people and enslaving others from a state that had tried to get out of the alliance and to stop paying all of this silver, tons of silver, to Athens, one city rebelled, and there was a man named Cleon who said that we should kill them all, sell the women into slavery, the children into slavery, kill all the men. And then there's another guy who said, oh no, let's be gentle. Let's kill only 1,000 people of them. And they were just slaughtered. 1,000 people were slaughtered. And then that will be a lesson to the rest of them. And then they're going to have to take a government very much like our radical democracy. All right. Politics, of course, and now here's what I wanted to say. I think you can probably see it, but I can move it up to the middle of this. Oops, you don't want to go that far. Politics is waged like a war against competitors, adversaries, but under fragile constraints. Every society did try to have at least a veneer of fairness in legislation and in elections. And there were established laws under an unwritten, evolved and evolving Constitution. Remember, the Constitution not written down. And one generation will interpret what Solon meant. Solon is supposed to be the founder of Athenian good government. So Solon meant this. And somebody will say, no, Solon meant that. Solon left some writings, but not about the detail of what we would call a constitution. Those constraints were often circumvented, gone around, take away, just find some way of bribing people without handing them money, promising them money, or giving them tickets or something that could be cashed in later, assuming that they vote the right way. And what I want to be legislated or whom I want to be elected gets elected. They're often circumvented, quite ignored, and everyone is doing this. See, everyone is equally corrupt. That's the thought that some corrupt governments like the people to think. It's going on again in my country now. Everybody is corrupt, so why worry about the corruption of a particular conspicuous person who's mega corrupt? I don't mention any names. So the corollary is out-cheat the cheater. Now, change the rules to make de facto into de jure. What is actually happening, this becomes the law now. And if you get control of the electoral assemblies and you get enough people in those magistracies and you can pack the Senate, then you can get laws changed so you can suppress a Caesar. And it was suppression of Caesar that led to the Roman Civil War. And I see what time it is, and I don't mean to usurp too much of your time. Let me say that here we have, whoops, what's going on here? No, I can't get back up. No, it jumps around, doesn't it? There are a couple of very good books about Pericles, and I'm going to have to limit what I say about him to very little. Whole books have been written about him. He's been idolized. Thucydides, the great Athenian historian, practically worshipped him. He was personally connected with him, and he owed some favors. He didn't like a guy who came after Pericles, who in fact convicted Thucydides of being a very bad general. He wanted to be a general. And we have here his first appearance was essentially just leading the cast of characters in some plays by the great father of tragedy, Aeschylus. And one of Aeschylus' plays was super patriotic. Now, there was one at the end of his career that was similarly, if somewhat ambiguously patriotic. But in this case, he was winning the people's support by paying, and it was expensive to produce these things, by paying for the production of something which glorified Athens' unlikely, improbable victory over the Persians in the Second Persian War. Aeschylus, balanced his presentation of the war without naming anybody. He showed somebody on the Well, for you, it's the left. For me, it's the right. But someone, you would say, the more conservative and someone of the more liberal, both were given notice without their names being mentioned. So everybody should be pleased. Our guy, if we're on this side, our guy, if we're on that side, was given a role, but the main role was the people of Athens in the fleet that won the decisive battle of Salamis, great sea battle, decisive, one of the great decisive battles in human history. It was Pericles who engineered the perfect machine. When they found that the revenue was enough to support the fleet, so the fleet that could guarantee that the silver keeps coming. You caught that argument. If the allies said, well, we can't pay that much, we can pay only this much, you could expect a visit from maybe 20 or 30 of the Athenian battleships, and they say, you're going to pay what you have been assigned to pay. Otherwise, we'll cut you off. We won't let any ships to or from you. And there were other things they could do. They even used force against the cities. They could invest the small islands only city. So one thing that he did was that, but it was in fact so lucrative that there was money left that he could build the Parthenon and some of those other beautiful buildings on the Acropolis that had been left in ruins to remind everybody of what the Persians had done back in 480 BCE. He made peace with the Persians. Well, then what do we need an alliance for? If the Persians are at peace with all of us, we don't need an alliance. We can secede, can't we? That didn't happen. He was anti-Spartan, anti-Corinthian. There are some national prejudices involved in this. These people, by the way, spoke in Sparta and Corinth. They spoke a different kind of Greek. They sounded strange. And they were culturally different in a number of ways. The Corinthians were an important merchant and naval power. The Spartans were landlubbers, the best infantry of the time in Greece. Pericles thought that the Spartans and the Corinthians had to be taught a lesson. These people who had fought alongside the Athenians against the Persians now were the enemy. And in some ways, they were an enemy, a more bitter enemy, or bitterly hated enemy than the Persians had been, because they were permanently threatening Athens at home in the Aegean area. Pericles intended to take one of the cities allied with Sparta that was right down the isthmus from Athens, to make that an example. And there were some other things going on. I can't talk about Potidaea, I can't talk about Plataea, but there were ways that Athens was interfering in the Spartan-Corinthian alliance. And also I don't want to get too complicated. I've been too complicated about some things already, so let me just move along. Pericles invited the Spartans to say the peace that we had established back decades ago is broken. The Spartans said, you have broken the peace, so we're going to attack you. And Pericles managed the war brilliantly, he thought, until, because of his policies, when the Athenians were herded into the city, because the Spartans were allowed, they're the land power, remember, they were allowed to ravage all of the Athenian hinterland, including towns outside. Everybody's in the city. Well, crowded into the city, they all caught plague. Whether the plague would have been so virulent or even it would have worked if the Athenian population in the city had been just as normal, rather than maybe 3 times as much as it had been. Pericles himself succumbed to the plague after seeing the death of his 2 legitimate sons. He succumbed to the plague. Some of the Athenians said that Apollo announced that he's going to be on the side of our enemies. Apollo has caused this plague. Can't go any further than that. I want to say a little bit about Caesar, but it can be very little about Caesar. Caesar, in fact, I can put in this little capsule. Caesar was a person who could not stand having someone above him. His adversary, Pompey, was someone who could not stand to have a peer. He must be above everybody. Caesar said nobody can be above him. That is the crux of it. There's a tragedy involved. Caesar had his only legitimate child was a daughter whom he loved. He married her, the fourth wife of this guy Pompey, who was his rival, married his daughter, whom he loved, to Pompey, probably pretty sure that he would love her, and he did. They lived together for a few years. She died in childbirth, and the baby that she was carrying also died. It would have been a son who would have been a son of Pompey and a grandson of Caesar. And if she hadn't died then, history might have been different, although there are some people who say, no, Pompey and Caesar were bound to collide. Never mind Julia, never mind the little boy who is son of one and grandson of the other. Caesar used what he could in alliances and from his personal wealth, and he got vast amounts of money from the conquest of Gaul, which made it possible for him to be generous to all kinds of people, doing them favors, giving them gifts. The word for gift in Latin, same as the word for gift in Greek, doron and donum. Those words are used, there are euphemisms for bribes. Caesar was capable of buying lots of people, but he was also on the popular side. So he tried to do things that would benefit the people, including soldiers who were demobilized, and they would get good land, and they'd get a little bit of money to start themselves. This, by the way, had been going on for a while, but Caesar was maybe the most generous of all to do that. He got himself appointed dictator. I didn't talk about the dictatorship earlier, but it's relatively easy to figure out what dictator means, except that the Romans had, in an emergency, they had a 6-year appointment of a dictator, meaning that the other magistrates all sit down, and the dictator puts the state in order. Whether it's a military crisis or some other crisis, the dictator puts the state, the disordered state, or the militarily threatened state into order. He got a dictatorship. Then he got himself a consulship and another consulship. And finally, in the last weeks of his life, he got himself appointed dictator perpetuus. You know what perpetual is. He was going to be lifetime dictator. Some people said he wanted to be king. Well, he might as well be king if he was that. On the Ides of March, he was killed. In this case, he was killed because of his dictatorship. Pericles was killed by the plague that he facilitated as a mass killer of the people that he was supposed to be serving. As many as a third of the Athenians may have succumbed to the plague, including first his sons. This is a real jab. If Apollo was responsible for this is really a way to hurt Pericles. His 2 sons died before his eyes, and then he died. And he was succeeded by, can't talk about Cleon now. I've talked long enough. So I thank you for your patience. I thank you. Some of you would be kind of embarrassing to run out of the room here. So even if you wanted to leave, you couldn't. But now you can, with my thanks to you for your attention and my hope that you got something from this, some curiosity about the Athenian Empire or the Roman imperium of a republic or a democracy on the Athenian side. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. Now is the time for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
What is the difference between Caesar being a dictator and later on princeps?
I say that again, my hearing isn't all the best.
What is the difference between Caesar being a dictator, and later on, people like August being our princeps?
I'll do this explanation as well as I can. He won a civil war against people who wanted to establish a more conservative, a less popular government, to establish the old senatorial oligarchy. And some of them fell in battle against him. But those who didn't, and it was a great number of people whom he spared, and he said to them, some of you hate me, some of you would probably still want me to be dead, but I hold no grudge against you. Let's all work together and make a good Roman state. And now this is before he became a dictator, but he became worried about some of those people, and he wanted to assure that they wouldn't take over the old kind of machinery of elections, and they wouldn't de-elect him. So he gave himself a lifelong, it lasted about 3 weeks, a lifelong guarantee against an effort to depose him. He was going to be above any law, but he was going to let other people be consuls and praetors and those other things. So he was concerned about his own security in office, but even in life. And it turned out that it backfired on him. He got himself killed instead of living for, well, how many years more would he have lived? He wanted to take a war to the east. He wanted to conquer Parthia. He'd always admired, since he was a young man, he'd always admired Alexander the Great, and he wanted to conquer at least parts of what had been Alexander's empire. He didn't live to do that either. But yet, to be a dictator is to have security in a constitution that he had changed. So he had changed the constitution for his benefit. So he could be consul sooner than he needed to be. He could be consul again sooner than he needed to be. There was no rule that you couldn't be consul more than once in every 10 years. Well, he became it consecutively, but that's not good enough. And he wanted some of the senatorial nobility to have that high title of consul and to sit in the Senate after they were through as the senior members of the Senate. So he hoped that they could share in government with him. But of course, their share might be a high one. He would call all of the shots at the end. So there was, in his thinking, he didn't believe that there was going to be an Ides of March, but there was, as we know. Is that satisfactory answer?
Yeah.
Okay. If it's not, let me know. Okay. Don't. Okay.
I think we have a question online.
Yeah.
So you can go on, just unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, I guess you can hear me, I hope.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm in the machine, professor, so sorry, I'm not in the classroom. So I have just, let's say, 4 conclusions that I could make from, that maybe we could make together. For example, in Athens, the democratic system was maybe too open and too easily manipulated during the time of war, but it was repaired, democracy, through constitutional reform. So my first question there would be, could these constitutional reforms be some, let's say, a road to the modern democracy, and how they made impact in the development of the, let's say, legal consciousness in the later era? And on the second question, I'll try to be really short here. I think that Rome, for example, depended too much on the personal relations between the generals, between the aristocracies, between these amicitas, how to say, friendships, rather than the legal system, at least in the first century before Christ. And they just replaced it and connected all of it when Caesar died in 44 BC on the Ides of March with simple autocracy, with simple dictatorship. But one thing there that bothers me to some extent is that dictatorship gave us Pax Ottomana, the period of peace and stability for 100 years and something, until the Antonines Plague and other crises that happened later in the history. So can we argue that dictatorships can have some benevolent, so to say, and also legal in a way, mechanisms to have one society keep intact and be, let's say, idealistic society. I don't know better words to use. Yeah. Sorry for a longer question, but
Okay, well, my hearing isn't too good, and maybe that wasn't the clearest loudspeaker on the apparatus in front of me. All right, first thing about constitutional reform. Caesar imposed a de facto constitutional reform, and he had the ideal of making it a law that the Roman nation could approve, not suffer, but approve. Well, it didn't work because there were some people who hated him. There are other people like Cicero who admired him and was a personal friend, but who could not stand his godlike position. And it's no accident that people who did like him, did admire him, did love him, actually made him into a god after his death. And that's what he probably would have wanted, and it was about the last thing that his enemies would want. And some of them went to war to prevent anything but restoration of the conservative government of someone like that guy Sulla, whom I mentioned hours ago, well, a long time ago. And I guess can you put into a sentence or two the second point that you raised?
well, the second point was mostly of the Augustus that replaced Caesar and started the autocracy. So they put Auctoritas Dei and like he was Pontifex Maximus and everything. So, but he gave us Pax Ottomana. So everything that they hated about Caesar, they allowed and they cherished in Augustus. Do you agree with that? I know. I mean, that's my conclusion, personal conclusion. So, do you think that that's a normal way of thinking, so to say?
Well, yeah, and that way of thinking is shared by a lot of people. Caesar is a controversial figure. When Plutarch set up his parallel lives, he had some difficulty in making a parallel for Caesar that would treat political Caesar. And instead, he paired him with Alexander, Caesar's idol, as a great general. And Caesar certainly was one of the great generals. Most of the battles he won, he was outnumbered, but he was a great leader of men. His men were ready to die for him, and some of them did. And he thanked them, he honored them. Political Caesar, Caesar's generalship is, I think, beyond question. His politics, his sense of his own dignity, and that's an important expression in his explanation of why he went to war. His dignity, his standing as a human being, as a Roman fellow citizen, never mind as king or anything like that, was seriously damaged. And the only way he could repair that damage was by extreme violence. There's one of the two books that I mentioned in this text above concludes that Caesar decided before he came back from Gaul that he was going to have to fight a civil war against Pompey. All of the back and forth in the year 50 into the year 49 that led to the Civil War, ostensibly, all of that was, in fact, confirmation that Caesar was right. There had to be a civil war. And but the two things, making a harmonious state by some kind of amnesty. Amnesty had been attempted in other places, not in Rome before, although something like it was established there. But amnesty, okay, we forget everything, everybody who's been killed, everybody who's been hurt. We're all going to join in one happy chorus and be Roman citizens. Amnesty was never really proposed. Instead, And see, amnesty would be equal for everybody. What Caesar proposed was like a god, although the ancient gods were not terribly forgiving, that he will forgive, he will be clement. And the implication, of course, is that he will not be prosecuted for anything that he ever does because nobody would dare to. But he is not offering himself clemency. He's expecting everybody to be so grateful for his forgiving them that they won't even think about all of the terrible things he did, including to some of the allies of Rome and in Gaul, where they were, well, never mind, there are lots of war crimes, we would call them, in connected with Caesar's conquests, but so had there been for Pompey's conquests and many another in Roman imperial history. They sometimes didn't take any prisoners, or if they took prisoners, they enslaved them. That was pretty usual in the ancient world. Okay, I hope that's something, at least in response to what you've raised.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your interest and for the questions or comments.
Can I ask just one short thing? Well, actually, two things, but the other is, have you published anything regarding this parallel, or do you intend to publish this? And the essential question is, you've given us the feminine terms for citizen, or rather a different one than the same one in Greek and Latin. What was the significance for women in Athens and Rome in being a citizen, given that they had no political rights? I know that their family members could benefit from that, for example, in Athens, since the reform where you had to be born from both mother and father citizens in order to have citizenship. But what benefits did the female citizens themselves have, if any?
Not very great ones, absolutely. But in comparison with the way women were treated elsewhere in the world, in Greece, Plutarch could not believe that women can have taken, this is something I passed over before, I can do this I think in a minute or two. Plutarch could not believe that women were brave enough on their own initiative to have stood between the Sabines and the Romans. They were daughters of Sabines, and Romans had grabbed them at a great festival, all the virgins, grabbed them and made them their wives. The Sabines obviously couldn't forgive this easily. Their daughters, their sisters, not their mothers, obviously, remember they're virgins, but their women have been stolen by Romans. And a war starts, and the war goes on for a while. But during that while, the women become dear to their Roman husbands, and they bear children. Now, remember what I said about Julia having a son for Pompey and a grandson for Caesar himself. Well, it's the same principle. The Roman women, now the Sabines are lined up, they got their spears ready, and their swords and everything, and they're going to fight to the end against the Romans, and the Romans are going to fight too. The women run between them, and they face the Sabines, and they say, okay, kill us, your daughters, your sisters, kill the babies. They come out there with the babies. Kill these, your grandsons, or your nephews, and of course the boy babies are more important. So there's still patriarchy in this. And so, kill us over our dead bodies, the dead bodies of your sisters, your daughters, the dead bodies of your grandsons or nephews. And then they turn to the Romans. Okay, you want to fight them? You got to do it over our dead bodies. The wives whom you have come to love, the wives who have borne you, the only children you have. Nobody else were going to marry these Romans. The Romans had no population. There was, I can't get into the background of this at any length. Suffice it to say that this was the Romans' chance to get wives, because nobody else was going to marry their daughters to the Romans. These are the only children you're going to have. We're probably the only wives you're ever going to have. If you love us, if you love us, well, the implication is don't fight over our dead bodies, but be reconciled. And they were reconciled. The two nations joined. Now, Plutarch told the story, and a Roman historian by the name of Livy told the story. When the Roman historian told the story, it was Mrs. Romulus who suggests to the women that they should be so bold as to do this. The Greek Plutarch says, no, some goddess came down and told them what to do. They couldn't have thought this up on their own, and they must have been galvanized by divine power. Women don't have the power, women don't have the courage to do this. But the Roman Livy thought that women did. And there are stories throughout Greek, through Roman legend about the valor of women as advisors, as loyal daughters, sisters, wives, and of course mothers to Roman children. So there's much more respect in Greek myth. In Roman myth and legend, there's much more respect for women than there is anywhere in most Greek myth. There are some exceptions, like Andromache in the Iliad, but really, or Penelope, faithful Penelope. But all right, don't get me started on mythology. You'll be here until the sun comes up. And it comes up late these days, doesn't it?
Thank you. Okay. And I think our colleague online has asked another question in the chat. He did say if there's time, of course. Let me just open the chat. He continued about Caesar and Augustus. Oh, it's a bit longer. So he says, also everything that people disliked in Caesar, it is his wannabe god thingy, they received very well in Augustus, and he gave him the title of Divus, accompanied by Auctoritas Dei. He formally never asked for any of that, but those same aristocrats and the people of Rome gave him that title. All of this ended the crisis and led to Pax Romana, the period of peace and prosperity for 100 years. Did all of this, at least in the Roman world, lead to the global equality of the citizens in the Roman Empire in the 3rd century in Constitutio Antoniana by Caracalla, and influence the development of collective legal consciousness in the ancient world, if there is time for you to answer?
Well, that's a nice Roman defense of the Roman imperialism. Yes, to a certain extent. But we can't, we know how it turned out. And Caesar himself, as he died, we don't know what his last thoughts were. Kai su teknon. He may have spoken in Greek and said, you, child. Or et tu, Brute, fili me, and you, Brutus, my son. There was a suspicion that Brutus might actually have been the natural son of Julius Caesar because of Caesar's relationship with Brutus's mother at a certain point. Well, whatever he said, he wasn't saying, we're going to establish peace in the world, even though I'm dead. Once I become a god, then I will guide you toward peace in the world. His adoption of his great nephew, Gaius Octavius, to become Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, was a brilliant insight. One of the things that Caesar recognized was the possibility, thank you all, have a good weekend, was a brilliant insight into the potential of a guy who was, I think, only 17 or 18 years old at the time he adopted him. So you can say Caesar, by choosing this as his adoptive son, controlled the course of history for the next 44 plus 17 minus 1 is over 60 years, because Augustus eventually did establish an empire that was sort of peaceful. There were some problems in Spain. There were some problems in mountains in this part of the world where they couldn't quite pacify everybody. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for Caesar leading the way, but Caesar also giving the world the person whom we know now as Augustus. And then all of those Caesars, some of them not so good as others. Okay, great. Thank you for that observation, and that's one way of reading history. But I always try to put myself in the position of somebody then, and not looking to what would happen. So, looking at what Pericles did in that war, that terrible war, not knowing that Pericles was going to pay for it with his sons and then with his own life, and leave the war unfinished and leave it to somebody whom he did not like and who actually prosecuted him, the demagogue called Cleon, whom Thucydides and the biographers generally disdain. He's one of the interesting characters. He's an important character in Aristophanes, but we'll leave Aristophanes out of it. Anything else? Yeah.
There was a word at the beginning of the table in your presentation. I think it was a free-syllable word. You said that it has no English equivalents. Its meanings were to have, to belong to a house, and to belong to a house through marriage. My question is, if you could possibly remember it. It seemed like a very interesting political concept. It's used, if you can remember which one it is. I'm guessing it's not just allegiance. Since you said that there's no English word for it.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably philia. And it's a word that Aristotle writes a whole book about in, I think, in both of his sets of ethics about philia. But philia, Antigone, you know Antigone, the one who defies Uncle Creon and buries her brother? Antigone is so devoted to philia in the narrow sense, it's male agnate relationship. Her brother of the same parents is dead. He doesn't have a wife. He doesn't have a child. He's got a sister. The sister has the obligation. One of the things I said about philia is that it could be something like duty or dutifulness. She has an obligation to bury him, never mind what the government says. He attacked Thebes. That doesn't matter. Creon is trying to defend Thebes. And the one brother of hers who defended Thebes and fell in the same battle, in fact, the two brothers killed one another. The one who defended Thebes, Creon honors. They're both of them nephews of his. The one who defended Thebes, he honors, and the one who attacked Thebes, he denies the honor of burial. Let the crows and the maggots consume him. So if there is any afterlife, his ghost is going to be unhappy, wandering around the battlefield probably forever, because he can't be properly cremated. So that's extreme agnate philia, but philia extends to relatives by cognation, relatives through your mother, but also relatives by marriage. You're not related necessarily by philia to your wife, and she isn't related to you. She belongs to her family of birth. That, by the way, is something involved in that Sabines versus Roman things. The women belong to both families, the family of birth, the Sabine, and the family of marriage. And they are related to their children in strictest ancient law. The woman is only the means by which the man gets children. She's not related. That's terrible, terrible kind of thinking. But because they were so interested in patriarchy and the male line through the father and the father's relatives, you're related to your father's sister. You're related to your father's grandmother, who was married to your father's father, more closely than you were related to a wife. And she's not related to your children. Your wife is not related to your children. That's why Medea, to attack Jason, can kill his children. You know the story of Medea, who kills her two children because Jason has thrown her over. He's going to marry a princess and get rid of this embarrassing barbarian woman. Medea says, these are my former husbands, my exes. Children. They will be his today. Tomorrow I will mourn them as my own. but she's going to kill them, and she does. She actually flaunts the dead bodies from the golden chariot of her grandfather, the sun god, at the end of the play. And that is how she punishes Jason, through his sons, because he's never going to have any others. Well, there's another story about how Jason has a couple of bastards on the island of Lemnos, but we'll leave those out. And again, don't get me started on mythology. I take out on, I don't teach anything at DU anymore, so I do as much teaching as I can. And someone should get a big hook and carry me off now, because I've gone too far. Again, thank you for your patience. Again, I should applaud you for your patience. And I will thank you, I hope, in advance for carrying something of what you got from me this evening, at least till tomorrow, if not for the rest of your lives. I don't think I'm trying to change anybody's lives from this, but maybe get an interest in something, or just to think about something, even to think about something not only in connection with ancient times.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think
You're welcome.
the classics can change minds.
I don't conceal that I enjoy doing this, so you gave me joy.
Thank you very much.